Hello and welcome to 9-Inch Charge. Welcome to the Old World Show. Today we are going to talk about the greenskins. Now, Tom, you used to have a greenskin army, didn't you?
I did indeed. In the glory of 8th, had a big old greenskin army.
So we're going to do a rundown today of greenskin units that we really enjoyed seeing on the tabletop, ones that we miss, ones that we might like to see come back, and how they played on the tabletop and things like that. But just before we do that, Tom, why didn't you tell us what it is about greenskins that drew you to the army and why you love them so much?
Their range at the start of 8th edition had so much character. It just did like really silly things. You had fanatics who were flinging massive balls of steel around, Mangler squigs running around and crashing into things, and then all you needed to do really was just march this massive force of green orc boys up the table, and then they just chew through everything you wanted them to.
Yeah, unless they were squabbling amongst themselves.
And then, like, if you wanted a fun game, and every time I played Warhammer Fantasy, all I wanted to do was just have a laugh, pretend I was having a beer, even if I wasn't having a beer. That was the ultimate, like, beer and pretzels army of Warhammer Fantasy for me. Like, you just have fun no matter what the situation was. There's no expectation. And when it worked for you, it was the best army in the game.
I swear there was a game I remember where animosity really worked for you, and then like all your army was just like right across the table in turn one. What was that?
I was playing Graham, and I finally.
So Graham took Empire, didn't he? All the time.
Empire, yeah, and he had his cannon set up on the right flank, and to mirror it, I was like, right, I'm going to get my fast units over there and get over there and tie up. I try a bit of a damn wood elf tactic. His cannon, get it off the board. I don't think it's turn 1. It's like turn 1 or turn 2, but I failed my animosity. But I rolled a 6, so I got to do a march move, then a charge, and I was in it. That was it. And then I hand of Gorked my massive unit of Black Orcs in front of him, and yeah, it's like caught between two massive hordes of orcs, and it just wasn't going to go well.
Oh man, I can remember the orc spell law being absolutely brutal. I mean, I think we've spoken about this before on the channel. When I had the Lizard Man army, and my Lizard Man army had no skinks. I didn't want any puny dinosaurs. I wanted the big dinosaurs and then the bigger dinosaurs, I suppose. So I didn't have anything below a Saurus. And I had 2 hordes of Fortisaurus, one on each flank. And then in the center, I had 25 Temple Guard with a Slan, and then Bastiladons and other big monsters around. And I can remember in turn 1, you cast Curse of the Bad Moon, which is the large template, and you just started at one end of the table and moved it all the way along and captured all of my units. And it's taken an initiative test or be slain outright, and they're all initiative 2. So then 2/3 of the army were just removed in the first magic phase of the game. And I can remember thinking, like, because now I magnetize all my models, they're in the trays, they're magnetized. But at that time, I had the old Games Workshop carry cases, and you have to take your models out and put them down. And I can remember thinking, I've just spent so long setting up like over 100 infantry models, and now the game's over. And it took me longer to set up the game than it did for us to play it. And then I think you were like, oh, should we have a rematch? And I was like, no.
That was it.
So that's a little bit of the history of me and Tom playing with them. So let's jump into units. The first unit that I want to talk about is the big man himself. I want to talk about Gorbad Ironclaw, because he's like the epitome of what it is to carry the warg and just go crazy. And he's such a formidable warrior. I've just, to refresh myself, I've pulled up the wiki. So I'll just read the opening paragraph for a bit of flavor text, and then we'll have a look at his rules. So Gorbad Ironclaw is one of the most infamous of all orc war bosses. In his day, Gorbad led a massive invasion that almost crushed the Empire. His army succeeding in slaying Emperor Sigmund, wiping out the imperial province of Solent off the map, Gorbad was a hulking orc who rose to fame as the leader of the Ironclaw tribe. It was he who first built the Iron Rock, the most redoubtable orc fortress in the old world. Yet conquering greenskin tribes was no real challenge for Gorbad, so he inevitably crossed over to the human land of the Empire. Basically, there was no one big enough for him to fight, so he just decided to pick a fight with an entire empire.
Yeah.
And slayed the Emperor. just ridiculous. So he was on that boar, wasn't he? And he had like the big axe, and he'd go charging into battle.
Yeah.
Nala was the name of his war boar. But I think we were talking just off stream, weren't we, Tom? And you were saying, "Oh, that axe." So shall we talk about that axe?
It's nice.
So the axe is Mangler the Mangler, and that is one of the most feared weapons ever to be wielded by an orc war boss. And when he uses it, he always strikes first. It causes multiple wounds, D3, and no armor saves allowed against it.
Oh, it's a brutal thing. That axe. So that axe was a result of an escalation between me and the Empire, really. Because after that game, I remember steam tanks were introduced. And I was like, how do I steam tank? So my go-to was let's just take the biggest bad there is with the biggest axe and just axe it in half.
Oh, yeah, those D3 wounds and no armor saves. I mean, it is the orc equivalent of getting a tin opener, isn't it? And just starting to unscrew the steam tank, and the crew inside are like, oh no. And then you can just imagine like the boar just burrowing in and just like goring them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was really cool. His other rules were the Great Leader. So he can whip any rabble into an effective fighting force. Friendly units within 18 inches of Gorbad that fail an animosity test. Sorry, add his current number of wounds to their roll on the animosity table. Oh, and he starts off with 3 wounds, but he's mounted as well.
3 wounds. Like that's a 50-50 chance of ended up on a 6, which is a move and charge.
Yeah, so he just whips them into a frenzy, basically. Come on, boys, and then they just go. So that's really good. So you're kind of wanting to fail your animosity when you're around him, and then re-roll that or add that to your roll, so you can just like charge off into the distance.
Yeah, you're always going to be doing something. That's the key. It's probably safer than taking a black orc because you're never going to roll a 1. So you're always going to be moving forward or charging, which is all they're there for.
The next rule is really great as well. It's the boss has a plan. Gorbad acts as both the general and battle standard in your army. In addition, the range of Gorbad's inspiring presence for hold your ground abilities increases from 12 to 18. So you always are going to want to include a battle standard in your army anyway, especially if you have got an army that's got low leadership, like goblins, for example. And goodness me, I don't even know what the snotling leadership is. We might get onto that later on. But things that are cowardly and likely to run away, he is surging them forward, bringing them on, and making sure they always hold their ground and they don't flee. And the last rule was orcs are the best. Gorbad was the most inspirational orc leader of all time and drew the biggest and best orc fighters from across the land to fight under his banner. An orc and goblin army that includes Gorbad may upgrade any number of orc boys and orc boar boys to big uns.
That's so sick. Unbelievable. I think we'll get on to big uns later, but they're a massive improvement over the regular boys. That is worth 10 points. I think it'd end up similar points to like a Chaos Warrior, but
well, why don't we go on to them? Why don't we go on to boys? So we've done a hero choice. The boys are a kit that Games Workshop don't make them anymore. They make Savage Orcs and they make Black Orcs, but they don't just do the normal regular rank and file boys that are doing the job. So this is a kit that I'd really like to see come back, and I think it's something of the low fantasy appeal of the old world that I just want to see your regular orc boys doing the stuff, I suppose.
Yeah. front work. They look fantastic. They're an old kit, but they've got character. They've got stuff going on.
Mm.
I think their weapons were a bit weird. I think if they could just give them like swords and axes, they had weird spiked clubs and weird spears that got a bit funny. But
yeah, I agree with you that I think the sculpt wasn't as good as sculpts that they could do nowadays. So I want to see a brand new unit of them, I suppose.
yeah, but they look all unit.
Sorry, Tom. Go on.
I was going to say they just look really good. Full unit of boys, like they look really menacing on the table.
Mm. Okay, so they were the core unit, and they came in two varieties. You had the Orc boys that had choppers, and you had the Arrow boys that had a hand weapon and a bow. So their basic stat line for an Orc boy is movement 4, weapon skill, ballistic skill 3, strength 3, and toughness 4, 1 wound, initiative 2, 1 attack, and leadership 7. And they had light armor. So they do have toughness 4, though, to be fair.
Yeah.
And a single unit in the army may be upgraded to big uns for 2 points per model. But obviously, as we said, there is hows and ways to get more of these. And the difference between a big un and an Orc boy is that a big un is strength 4. And he's weapon skill 4, which puts him then toe-to-toe with a human fighter.
It puts it better than a human fighter, doesn't it? Like the difference was they had, I think it was the 5th or 6th edition box that they had humans and orcs, didn't they? And one was one had higher toughness, one had higher like weapon skill, and that was their trade-off. Apart from that, they're pretty. Orc boy biggins are ridiculous, especially when you get special rules.
Yeah, strength and toughness 4, weapon skill 4 is really nice.
Yeah.
And they're only 6 points a model, which as an elf player looks like dirt cheap. It's like half the cost of a Glade card.
Is that 6 points then with the or without?
To make them a big one, they're 8 points.
8 points a model. That's still a bargain.
Yeah, and they don't have shields actually, so you could give them an additional hand weapon for 1 point per model, and then you've got 2 attacks, or you can give them spears and fight in additional ranks.
I'd go for the additional weapon.
Yeah, I would. I just want to chop stuff. Just like you can just see them kind of just like mangling their way through stuff. So they're kind of your basic infantry, but they come with a bit of a surprise that you can upgrade them. And I just want to see them come back because they're your cool normal orcs. These are your everyday orcs that you're going to see that take up most of the army before you get on to your kind of more specialist orcs, your black orcs, and things like that. So
there's a really important rule that I think we missed out on there with all of the Orc boy units, that they all have a rule called choppers. So in the first turn of combat, it's not the first turn they charge, the first turn of combat, they all get +1 strength. So your Orc Biggin is strength 5 in that first turn of combat.
Wow. And that is the all-important turn of combat, because if you can break your enemy in turn 1 and you don't get drawn into a long slog, that's where you want to do it, isn't it?
Yeah. So I used to run 50 Savage Orc Biggins, which were 2 attacks base, frenzy, with an extra hand weapon. So they had 4 attacks each, I think it was. You can double check that. They have a 6-up ward save, no armor save, so they're a bit fragile, hence why you run them in 50. But just a blender when they got in is you're doing like 50 attacks, because you had I think it's 3 from the front rank each, so it may have been 3 attacks each, and then supporting 20 if they all got in, which was nuts at strength 5.
I'm just here thinking I didn't even get to that point because you just wiped me off with magic before we even got there, let alone trying to fight a unit of 50 of those. Just absolutely mental. But yeah, you're right. They Savage Orcs start off with 1 attack with their frenzy for 2. They can have an additional hand weapon again. And then the big uns are strength 4, and then the choppers strength 5.
There's a weird them because you can buy them a shield upgrade, can't you?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, you can't use a shield and be frenzy. Yeah, we. I don't know why. Oh well.
Well, maybe when the old world comes out, that might be something that is a bit
Yeah.
that gets FAQ'd or something like that. Can they lose frenzy? Maybe if they
Yeah,
take a shield, they lose it. It might be something like that.
turn of combat, you lose your frenzy.
So then you can use your shield.
You pipe down a bit.
All right. Shall we move into special?
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk about Black Orcs, because Black Orcs are a unit that are still around in Age of Sigmar. They're a unit that you took through into Age of Sigmar, actually, aren't they? When you were using Orcs there, and they are armed to their teeth, and they carry heavy armor and a huge array of weapons.
Yeah, these are fantastic.
I'm just going to have a look. If you want to talk about why you like them, I'm going to have a look at the specific arm to the teeth rule.
About the models, without talking about the models, I remember the arm to the teeth rule. At the start of a combat, you can choose between using a single hand weapon and a shield, a pair of hand weapons, or a great weapon. And like, they're really well designed as a unit. I don't say that a lot about fantasy units, because you had to build them in a very specific way. Like, some of them would have the sword and shield, axe and shield. Some of them would be paired with great weapons and with a pair of hand weapons. And it looked amazing, because it looked like a proper rabble of orcs running to. They're all using weird different weapons, and it was massive axes, and everything was like cranked to 10. And it was them charge across the table. And then when it got in, they actually could choose to really, like, they're like a Swiss Army knife. You could put them into your elves and use 2 hand weapons, put them into your tree kin and get your big axes down to, chop wood for the fire and all of that. It is such a cool rule. It's a shame in Age of Sigmar, they all just got different weapon profiles, but, traditionally they just carried everything somehow. They had the first person shoot a massive backpack of guns. He just slogged around with them.
What's ridiculous about them is that, talking about giving them great weapons, is they're base strength 4. So with a great weapon, they strike at strength 6.
Yeah, strength 6. First order combat, strength 7.
Strength 6 is the base strength of a dragon.
Yeah.
So let's not underestimate that you've got a unit that fights with the strength of a dragon. It's just obscene.
Yeah, they're not slouches. They're really cool.
But it's not all about brute strength and ignorance in this army. It's also about being sneaky gits, isn't it?
Love the sneaky gits.
So, and also talking about toolboxes and useful units, fanatics, and you didn't have to take them in every unit. They just put the fear of God into your opponent. If you had a unit of night goblins, you were just like, oh no, because all that is going to happen is, as soon as I get near that unit, I'm going to get absolutely murderized by whirling, swirling gobos of death, who gets caught on the end of kind of like spiky cannonballs, don't they, and just whirl around.
They were so brutal. So just like, it was unreal how brutal they didn't have to do. They had to last a turn, and they were well worth their points. It always made them back. Yeah, and they were fun.
What was really annoying is like, also when they're out on the table, it was really difficult to then get them. Like, if they didn't last a turn, it was quite difficult to, sometimes I found, to then kill them and like pin them down.
Do you want to waste a turn of Glade Guard shooting at a fanatic that's right in front of your Wild Riders? Like, or would you risk it? Because you could run into them and they do 1 hit and you could survive it, or they could do 6 and take out your.
Yeah. You would have to shoot them, but oh my goodness. Yeah, I think fanatics, actually they expanded fanatics, didn't they, in Age of Sigmar? They had like the puffball ones.
Yeah, they
did. I think that's cool to see, and I'd like to see different kinds of fanatics, and I like that kind of more mushroom, kind of more eccentric focus that we've got. I mean, in Age of Sigmar, goblins are just off their heads. They speak to the moon and they collect bottles, and they're just mad. They're even kind of, I guess, more mad and less civilized than they were in the old world. I'd like to see a bit of that come back. And as part of that, I know we're jumping around a bit, but I would like to see more crazy inventions and things. And I really, really loved the Doom Diver. And I don't think it was the best unit in the army by a long way on the tabletop, but it was definitely one of my absolute favorites, because you cannot carry, the eccentricity of a goblin better than that, I don't think.
No. That really sums up the goblins, and a lot of the that one unit is just fantastic. What better things do? It's like we could shoot a projectile, or we could shoot a goblin who can guide himself in. He can fly in and then do a whole lot of damage.
He did an insane amount of damage. So
Yeah.
the Doom Diver, when it got into something, it would say, so if any units are touched by the Doom Diver's base, then each must take D6 strength 5 hits with no armor save allowed. I mean, how pointy is his helmet?
You essentially shot a fanatic across the table. And it can recorrect as well. So if you rolled a dice, you rolled your artillery dice to see how far it was going to scatter, and then you rolled another artillery dice where it was D6, and then it went back in that direction. So yeah, it's pretty laser point. It was the start of the laser pointer artillery, really, where it would always hit. Very few games where it missed its target.
I think that's another thing, isn't it, about this army, is that one of the things that has been forgotten in Age of Sigmar is a lost art, isn't there, of war machines. And
yeah,
there was a shooting build of Arab Boys that was popular for a while, but the game that how it progressed, and something I'd like us to get back to, is having more of these. And actually, you would never think it if you were brand new to Warhammer and you started playing Age of Sigmar, you would never think that orcs had amazing, a lot of war machines.
You can really put a lot of war machines on the
Well, you could take up to 6 spear chuckers.
Yeah, it's
which are the bolt thrower equivalent.
Yeah, and then you could take, was it 4 rock lobbers? I think there's another special allowance for the rock lobbers. So I think in total you could end up with about 10 artillery pieces on the table. That nuts. They're no slouch artillery pieces either.
I think you probably do need more, because the ballistic skill is still only 3.
Yeah, but that's the same as an empire. The more you're 3, except I guess the orc one, if it rolled a 1, it just kind of blew itself up. But
but you could add an orc bully to the crew.
I think a lot of the competitive builds I looked at it was just everything was decked out in artillery. You'd essentially build your list around having maxed artillery, and then what else you could fit in, was just what else you could fit in, and it was phenomenal. I've seen a few games played with it, and it was hideous.
I do think as we go along and as we talk about this more, it just is really striking me how diverse this army is.
Yeah,
it's got everything, and you can play it in all different play styles. You could do a sneaky git centered army, you could do a artillery styled army, you could do a combat focused army. You've got great magic in there, and then you've got big monsters like the giant and the trolls, the wyvern. There's all sorts in there. But I think the one, and I know we're going back to talking about your games against Graham again, but the one that really stood out for me, the unit that you got the most use out of, and I think you used to run 2 actually, if I remember, was the Mangler squig.
Oh yeah, the Mangler squig was so good. It was so much fun, and it was a fanatic that you had control over for the first few turns of the game. So I used to put 1 on each flank, and then just run them up, and then kind of start picking my targets from there. So if someone had, Graham used to deploy his knights on the flanks, so I always mirror matched with a Mangler squig each, and it'd go in and do, I think it's like strength 6, D6 strength 6 hits or something ridiculous. And that's that taken care of. And then they just lost control and started going crazy. Artillery die, scatter them, and they'd end up running amok in the enemy's ranks, which was a lot harder to deal with than a fanatic, because you couldn't just I'm going to shoot them off with Glade Guard. You needed a proper dedicated artillery piece, like a cannon. Oh yeah, you shoot my Mangler squigs with a cannon. That means my Ragnarok isn't getting shot off for another 2 turns. Thank you very much. Loved him.
I think they're great for 65 points. They're fantastic.
Yeah. And they've got new models, which, if I get goblins, are going to be the Mangler squigs of choice for me, because they're redonk.
Yeah, they're really cool. And there's a bit of sneaky something that you can do with that. It depends how big you want your Mangler squig to be, but some people did used to cut them in half and then have to do that. Why didn't they? Yeah,
I brought 1 Mangler squig and had 2 for the price of 1, because you had to save it.
Yeah, with a bit of creative basing and stuff like that, absolutely, it looks just right. I think that's all the units, but goodness me, that was really exciting, wasn't it? They're an army that I think we really need to see on the tabletop. Just so cool. So if you guys played Orcs and Goblins, let us know what you thought, what your favorite units were. I know we haven't covered everything, but I mean, we could just talk all day, but we are constrained by how long
all day and only get through the core of the list. Like army out there with more diverse choices of what you can do, and I think that's the beauty of it. I'd like to see Bane as 1 book.
I would.
And instead of I'd really like to see an Age of Sigmar type keyword for any of them that are joined back in. So the hobgoblins, they kind of float between Daily Like Orcs and so instead of you can just mix and match and have them the orc warband of your dream. Yeah, because it just looks fantastic. It's one of those armies that I just don't think you can go wrong, no matter how you play.
Yeah, definitely something for everyone there. I think next time we're going to do, instead of a unit focus, we're going to do a kind of lore focus, and we're going to talk about where they are in the setting for the old world game, what's going on with them, who are they trying to invade, who are they fighting, and all that kind of stuff. So that will be next time. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you everybody who made it all the way to the end, and we will see you next time.
Okay.
Thank you very much for watching. Please be sure to leave a comment and let me know what you think. I do read every single comment. If you've enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a like. And if you'd like to see more content like this in the future, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to take the conversation even further, you can join the 9 Inch Charge Hobby Hangout group on Facebook. This is a place for us to come together as a community and encourage each other and chat about our hobby, and feel free to share your models, thoughts, ideas, or ask any questions that you may have. There's a link in the description below. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can find a link in the description to our Patreon page, or you could become a YouTube member. And you can also support the channel by using the affiliate link we have to Element Games. They have a really extensive hobby range. I'm sure you can find anything that you're looking for on there, and they also sell it at a discount to Games Workshop. And if you use the affiliate link, we get a small amount of commission back that we can use to put back into the channel. As ever, this has been 9 Inch Charge. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.